government to set up special committee to solve military housing issue. Kedah seeks 100 million ringgit over Ulu Muda water catchment compensation. Good afternoon, I'm Azlani Ardani and you're watching Updates at Noon. A special committee to focus on housing for military personnel nationwide will be set up. Defence Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said the special committee would also review every military housing project agreement. The minister said if there were housing projects that failed to be implemented and had problems, the ministry would cancel the agreements that had been signed. He added the houses of the existing military personnel were also deteriorating and dilapidated.
Dan saya dapati bahawa banyak perubahan yang perlu dilakukan. Kerana setengah bangunan ini daripada tahun 70-an. Ya, setengah. Dan dari segi, bukan saja dari segi keadaannya yang sudah pun teruk, ya, usang dan sebagainya, tapi dari segi bilik pun hanya ada 2 bilik. Dah bertentangan dengan dasar kerajaan dari segi perumahan, iaitu minimum 3 bilik untuk setiap rakyat di Malaysia.
He said the matter needed to be resolved immediately and the military personnel needed 35,000 units of houses. Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri said he would meet with Affin Bank, whose shareholders are the Armed Forces Fund Board, to be able to provide special packages for housing financing. He said the special packages were for military personnel and ex-servicemen who had retired to buy and own their own homes in an effort to reduce their burden. On another note, the Defence Ministry MINDEF will take appropriate action against the company responsible for the delay in delivering 6 littoral combat ships, LCS, which were supposed to be delivered in 2019. Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri said at the moment they were waiting for feedback from the company. He said his ministry was conducting an investigation into the matter as the company had failed to complete the project within the allotted time.
Kita boleh hantar tuntutan untuk denda lewat, tapi itu salah satunya, tidak menyelesaikan isu, menyiapkan kapal. So kita akan bentangkan di dalam kabinet 3 cadangan. Saya dah sebut dalam parlimen, ada 3 cadangan kita.
The minister said this when asked to comment on the 2019 Auditor General's report (LKAN) on the issue. On Monday, according to the LKAN, it was found that MINDEF had failed to impose a late fine of 116.54 million ringgit on the company following the delay in the delivery of 6 LCS. The Kedah government is seeking 100 million ringgit in compensation from the federal government for using the Ulu Muda Forest Reserve in SIK as water catchment area for domestic and agricultural needs. Kedah Menteri Besar Muhammad Sanusi Makno said the state government had negotiated with the Natural Resources Ministry to seek compensation to maintain the catchment areas. Replying to a supplementary question from Kubang Rotan Assemblyman Muhammad Asmirul Mahir Aris during a question and answer session at the Kedah State Assembly yesterday, he said the state is asking for 100 million ringgit as compensation for the retention of water catchment areas in Forest Reserve Ulu Muda. Earlier, Muhammad Asmirul wanted to know the state government's commitment in ensuring that 96,558 hectares of paddy fields in the Muda Agricultural Development Authority MADA area, which also gets its water resources from the forest reserve, was assured. Muhammad Sanusi also reiterated the state government's stance that will continue to maintain the Ulu Muda Forest Reserve area from being involved in any logging activities in an effort to ensure that the water catchment area was preserved. He said the state government was also committed and assured to take care of the water catchment area, which could benefit 4.2 million people in Kedah, Perlis and Penang for domestic, agricultural and industrial use. The Menteri Besar said the state government is continuing its policy of preserving the environment and needs to consider alternate areas elsewhere allowed by the Forestry Department to meet the demands submitted by the logging companies. Some Works Ministry projects were among the 101 projects worth 6.61 billion ringgit reportedly awarded through direct negotiations by the previous government. Works Minister Datuk Sri Fadilah Yusof said there was some such project involving the ministry under the Pakatan Harapan PH government.
Yang diputuskan oleh Kementerian Kerajaan Pakatan Harapan dulu memang ada sebahagiannya di kementerian kita dan mengesahkanlah apa yang dikatakan oleh tentu sekarang.
Anggaran nilai dia, Datuk Seri?
Saya tak tahu.
Tak tahu lagi?
Saya tak tahu.
So, Datuk Seri sedang semak sekarang ni?
Saya akan semaklah all the detail tu lah.
The minister was commenting on Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz's revelation in the Dewan Rakyat on Monday that the PH administration had approved 101 government projects or acquisitions worth 6.61 billion ringgit through direct negotiations during its 22-month rule. He said the ministry was still checking the details to determine the actual cost of these projects. It was reported that the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission had received several memorandums from non-governmental organisations on the issue and that it would get a list of the 101 projects from the Finance Ministry. Employers who fail to comply with the Workers' Minimum Standards of Housing and Amenities Act 1990, Act 446, which will be fully enforced on 1st September, could face a maximum fine of 50,000 ringgit for each offence. Human Resources Minister Datuk Seri M. Saravanan said the act will be enforced by the Department of Labour of Peninsular Malaysia, JTKSM, to ensure the employers comply with the provision of the law. The minister said beginning next Tuesday, employers must comply with Act 446 by providing proper housing and accommodation as well as other facilities for the workers.
Akta 446 adalah lengkap dari segi kemudahan-kemudahan untuk pekerja, termasuk dari segi tempat mandi untuk wanita dan lelaki, tebal atau bantal tilam dan bantal dan sebagainya, maka paling cukup lengkap. Maka ini akan menjadi satu lawatan kerja untuk melahirkan kesedaran di kalangan industri player supaya mereka memastikan nasib pekerja-pekerja tak kira sama ada pekerja tempatan ataupun pekerja asing dibela.
He said this to media after working visit to Menara Top Glove in Setia Alam. Also present was Top Glove Corporation Berhad Executive Chairman Tan Sri Dr. Lim Wee Chai. The Workers' Minimum Standards of Housing and Amenities Amendment Act 2019, Act 446, which extends to all employment sectors, providing housing and accommodation for workers, will come into force on 1st June this year. The previous Act 446 jurisdiction only covered the housing and accommodation aspects of more than 20 acres plantation and mining sectors. Meanwhile, Top Gloves affirms that the government will audit the glove makers' recruitment fee reimbursement program to prevent import bans and allegations of forced labour. Leading glove manufacturer Top Glove has promised to refund up to 53 million ringgit in backdated recruitment fees to its foreign workers in the hope that a US import ban on its medical gloves will be lifted. The company made an initial payment of 4.4 million ringgit earlier this month.
Top Glove already started zero recruitment phase 1.5 years ago. Now they're talking about those previous years, 5 years, 10 years ago. So we will find solution because this one is something new to us, recruitment phase 1.5 years. Those 5 years, 10 years, nobody thought about it. So we are finding solution. I think everything we do must be win-win. Good for the worker, good for the employers, good for the government.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection has cited forced labor allegations as the main reason for the ban on products from two subsidiaries of the world's largest medical glove producer. The reimbursement of the recruitment fees is one of the prerequisites for the lifting of the order. Foreign workers are often forced to pay high recruitment fees to foreign employment agents to secure jobs in Malaysia, a debt they then work to pay off throughout the duration of their contracts. Tan Sri Lim said the payments to the company estimated 10,000 foreign workers will be made in 12 installments. Prasarana Malaysia Berhad is expecting the number of passengers for the Kelana Jaya line of the light rail transit LRT service to rise by over 10% with the use of 27 Bombardier Innovia Metro 300 new train sets. Its chairman Datuk Sri Tajuddin Abdul Rahman said so far Prasarana had received 3 of the train sets and the rest until 2023.
Dua kita dah terima sebelum ni. Dua lagi dalam perjalanan melalui kapal laut yang ini merupakan set yang terakhir.
Datuk Sri Tajuddin said this after welcoming the arrival of the 5th train set by air yesterday. One of the 27 new train sets purchased under the Kuala Lumpur Additional Vehicle KLAV project, it arrived at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. He said the train's arrival was historic as it was the first transported via the world's biggest public cargo plane, Antonov AN 124-100. Mindtech Resources Berhad, one of Malaysia's largest aggregate mining businesses, is actively bidding for 1.2 billion ringgit worth of tenders in the energy as well as engineering procurement, construction and commissioning EPCC sectors. Chairman Dato' Awang Daud Awang Putra said the company's diversification into energy, particularly oil and gas and EPCC, would in time deliver an improvement to the company's financial results. He said the company is also exploring contracts in new markets outside Malaysia, such as Kazakhstan.
We have in the pipeline in Kazakhstan as well. It's more to the platform upgrading and the explore on the development construction in the Kazakhstan.
Dato' Awan Daud said this at the launch of Mindtech's logo rebrand yesterday. Mindtech is confident of securing at least 130 million ringgit from the total contracts currently being tendered for. The company also sees a new market potential in Indonesia following an agreement entered into with a partner there who owns a coal mine. Still ahead, a teenager arrested over killings at Kenosha protest. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Wednesday sought to reassure pupils about the risk of going back to school after a policy reversal on face masks sparked fresh questions about the government's handling of the COVID-19 outbreak. The government backtracked on its insistence that students in England should not have to cover their nose and mouth when they return to class from next week, amid concern about a rise in new infections. On a visit to school in central England, Johnson thanked students for enduring months at home because of the outbreak, which he said had helped the country get the disease under control. The new guidance advises secondary school students aged 11 to 18 and staff to wear face coverings in corridors and communal areas in places with local COVID-19 restrictions. Teaching unions had called for the UK government, which is responsible for education in England, to follow Scotland, which has a separate education system and already requires pupils to cover up between lessons. But while welcoming the change, critics, including the main opposition Labour Party, said ministers had shirked the responsibility by leaving enforcement to individual schools. A teenager was arrested on murder charges Wednesday after 2 people were shot dead during anti-police protests in the US city of Kenosha, as President Donald Trump said he was sending in additional federal forces. Violent clashes have erupted in the Midwestern city since police shot a black man point blank in his back as he tried to enter his car. During protests on Tuesday, 2 people were shot dead and a third injured after a man in civilian clothes with an assault rifle opened fire on demonstrators. Antioch police said the Kenosha County authorities had issued an arrest warrant for the individual responsible for the incident, charging him with first-degree intentional homicide. It said the suspect, a 17-year-old Antioch resident, is currently in custody of the Lake County judicial system, pending an extradition hearing to transfer custody from Illinois to Wisconsin. Trump announced that additional federal forces were headed to Kenosha as police tried to keep control of the volatile demonstrations. Hurricane Laura was barreling towards the coast of the southern U.S. states of Louisiana and Texas on Wednesday as a monster Category 4 storm, prompting warnings of unsurvivable storm surge and evacuation orders for hundreds of thousands of Gulf Coast residents. The Miami-based National Hurricane Center said Laura was packing winds of 230 kilometers per hour and was expected to make landfall along the Gulf Coast late Wednesday or early Thursday. As an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane, the NHC said Laura may pummel the Louisiana and Texas coast with up to 6 meters storm surge and extreme winds, cause flash flooding and possibly spawn tornadoes. It said an unsurvivable storm surge with large and destructive waves will cause catastrophic damage from Sea Rim State Park, Texas to intercoastal city, Louisiana. In the Texas towns of La Porte, near Houston, residents were stocking up on essentials and a voluntary evacuation was in place. In New Orleans, the historic French Quarter was empty of tourists. Sandbags were piled up in front of the doorways of colonial-style buildings and windows were boarded up with plywood. Laura earlier caused flooding in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, killing at least 25 people. Rescue workers in Afghanistan searched Wednesday for survivors of flash floods that killed at least 100 people and destroyed hundreds of houses in a city north of Kabul. Troops pulled dozens of victims from the rubble of collapsed buildings in Sharika, capital of Parwan province, after torrential overnight rains fueled fierce floods that swept through the city. Officials and witnesses said many children were among the dead. Piles of rocks from destroyed buildings were scattered across the city, with roads blocked by mud and debris and cars flipped on their side. Afghanistan's State Ministry for Disaster Management said the death toll from the floods had risen to 100, with about 100 other people injured and nearly 500 houses destroyed in the floods. It said flash floods were also reported in other provinces, but there were no reports of casualties. Torrential downpours and flash flood kill scores of people annually in Afghanistan. The presidential palace said in a statement that the President Ashraf Ghani had ordered emergency relief to be sent to Sharika. Belarusian Nobel Prize-winning author Svetlana Alexievich said Wednesday she refused to answer investigators' questions after she was summoned as a witness in a criminal probe into the opposition. Opponents of President Alexander Lukashenko formed a coordination council to oversee a peaceful transition of power after they rejected his claim to have won a sixth term in an August 9th presidential vote. Alexievich was named a member of the council's presidium but has not attended its sessions. She arrived at the investigative committee's headquarters in Minsk with other members of the presidium and left shortly afterwards, saying she had refused to answer questions and that the council's only goal was to unite society. Alexievich, who won the Nobel Literature Prize in 2015, is an outspoken critic of Lukashenko. Another member of the council, former diplomat and culture minister Pavel Latushko, was questioned by investigators for several hours on Tuesday. The European Union has rejected the results of the election and said it will impose sanctions on between 15 and 20 people it believes are responsible for election fraud and cracking down on peaceful protesters. Argentina formally opened consultations with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) on Wednesday to agree new terms on the repayment of $57 billion bailout agreed in 2018. President Alberto Fernandez's office said in a statement that the president had spoken with IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva to begin negotiations aimed at reaching a new understanding with the organization. In a statement released by the IMF, Georgieva described the talks as very constructive and positive, adding IMF stand ready to play its role. She said they look forward to deepening their dialogue on best support to the government's effort to manage the impact of the pandemic, jumpstart growth and job creation, and reduce poverty and unemployment while strengthening macroeconomic stability for the benefit of all Argentines. Fernandez told Georgieva of the need to work together with the IMF to sort out the disorder that the country inherited from the previous government. Fernandez put repayments to the Washington-based lender on hold and renounced outstanding tranches of the bailout when he assumed the presidency last December, saying Argentina already had enough debt. Earlier this month, Fernandez's government reached a deal with three major creditors groups to restructure a $66 billion debt after months of strained negotiations and missed deadlines. In sports, Celtic knocked out of Champions League qualifying. Stay with us. The National Sports Council (NSC) has confirmed that 10 para-athletes from 5 sports have qualified for the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics, which will be held from 24th August to 5th September 2021. The athletes are Muhammad Nur Saiful Zulkifli and Brenda Anelia for swimming, S. Suraj and Wiro Julian for archery, Muhammad Ziyad Zulkifli and Wong Kargi, Muhammad Rizwan Muhammad Puzi and Abdul Latif Romli for athletics, Chew Mei Lun Boccia and Bonnie Bunyao Augustin for powerlifting. NSC Paralympic Division Director Muhammad Sofian Hamzah said their target was to have 31 para-athletes at the Tokyo Games. However, he added that they are still monitoring the performances of the para-athletes before announcing the full list. Muhammad Sofian was met after the sponsorship ceremony to hand over Bata shoes to the National Paralympic contingent. Also present were Paralympic Council of Malaysia (PCM) President Datuk Seri Megat Deshariman, Bata Malaysia Marketing Manager Diana Wong and Malaysian Bata Consultant Datuk James Selvaraj. Previously, the International Olympic Council (ICO), International Paralympic Council (IPT), 2020 Tokyo Organising Committee and the Government of Japan had agreed to change the date for the 2020 Paralympics from 24th August to 6 September to next year following the COVID-19 pandemic. Celtic were knocked out of the Champions League on Wednesday when a 2-1 home defeat to Ferencváros of Hungary meant that for the first time in 15 years, they failed to even make the third qualifying round. The Scottish champion were hampered for the single-leg tie by the absence of leading striker Odsonne Edouard with a thigh injury.
Send that one into the box, but easily cleared.
David Seager shot the Hungarian side into the lead in the 7th minute of the second qualifying round, tied behind closed door at Parkhead. Ryan Christie deputising for Edouard at level in the 53rd minute with a deflected shot. Despite dominating possession, Celtic were undone and then Todd McNuen scored a 74th minute winner on a breakaway. Ferencváros, coached by former Tottenham and West Ham striker Sergei Rebrov, can look forward to a final qualifying round clash. Celtic dropped down to the Europa League qualifiers.
I actually thought he dealt with the problem.
England left-back Ben Chilwell on Wednesday became Chelsea's third high-profile signing of the summer, leaving Leicester for a fee reported to be around £50 million. Chilwell's arrival at Stamford Bridge on a 5-year deal follows the signing of Hakim Ziyech and Timo Werner from Ajax and RB Leipzig, with more business expected before the transfer window closes. While neither Chelsea nor Leicester officially disclosed the sum paid for Chilwell, the Foxes said on their website it was one of the largest transfer fees ever received by the club. Leicester Academy product Chilwell, who has 11 England caps, made his debut for the Foxes in October 2015 and made 123 appearances for the club. Chelsea have been heavily linked with the suit for PSG's veteran Brazil defender Thiago Silva, while Bayer Leverkusen's Kai Havertz is still in line to make the switch to Stamford Bridge. Owner Roman Abramovich's staunch backing has put Chelsea in a strong position in the transfer market, with the club able to offset the effects of the coronavirus better than many other clubs. World number one Novak Djokovic cruised into the semi-finals of the ATP and WTA Western and Southern Open on Wednesday by routing Germany's Jan-Lennard Struff 6-3, 6-1. Djokovic, who launches his bid for a fourth US Open title and 18th Grand Slam crown on Monday, needed only 62 minutes to advance to a Thursday semi-final against Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut, who upset defending champion Daniil Medvedev by 1-6, 6-4, 6-3. Djokovic had no issues with the prior neck injury as the 33-year-old Serbian tested himself well on the Flushing Meadows hard courts in the same spectacular COVID-19 bubble quarantine atmosphere where the US Open will be played. Djokovic won the title of the event typically played in Cincinnati in 2018 after 5 prior finals losses and looks like he could claim a second title in 3 tries while warming up for the US Open and testing the improvements made to his game since the COVID-19 shutdown. Bautista Agut ran 12th for at bat after being blasted in the first set. His reward is a non-form Djokovic, who has won 5 of the past 7 Grand Slam titles as he chases Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal for the all-time Slam record. The other semi-final will send Greek 4th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas, who advanced down 5-6 when American Riley Opelka retired against the winner of a late match between Canada's Milos Raonic and Serbian Filip Krajinovic.
Kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, kesetiaan kepada raja dan negara, keluhuran perlembagaan, kedaulatan undang-undang, kesopanan dan kesusilaan.
That's it from us this afternoon. In our top story, government to set up special committee to solve a military housing issue. News at 10 comes on this evening on My Free Views Berita RTM News Channel. I'm Azlani Adani. Goodbye for now.